Okay, tonight's talk is a letter to a pagan city. We're going to start with a bit of video. Stephen? Now, one of the things which sets us apart maybe from other creationist organisations is that we have a special emphasis that sometimes we bring up, which is to do with the change that we see in culture. When I was very new as a Christian, somebody said that I should start to read commentaries and things, and the first commentary I read was on the book of Romans. And in the book of Romans it said, in this commentary it said that every Christian should memorize the book of Romans and learn what it says. And so I didn't get very far at first with this, and I started with chapter 1. And that became a chapter which has lived with me in many ways. And for me it's become a key to actually looking at culture. It seems to make a prediction about culture, what will happen when people reject the notion of an all-powerful and of a creator God. And today we'll be looking to see if that's true, if that's the case in our society, which some people are calling a post-Christian society, if this trend is happening. And this is the trend which I see in Romans chapter 1, in the second half, from verse 18. It starts off with people denying that there is a creator God. And then it moves on to say that when people reject God, they don't stay there. You don't see it becoming a nation of atheists, but it moves on from atheism to paganism. That people, rather than just saying there's no God, let's be humanists, they say, well, nature is so intertwined, there must be something, nature almost itself must be conscious. From paganism, you see a move into sexual immorality, and from sexual immorality, you see a total moral meltdown leading to murder and all of the kind of worst forms of what the Bible would call sin. And so I'm going to bring you that part of Romans chapter 1. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God has been made plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Okay, so I'm going to start by looking at that first section. So it starts by saying that the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven. And wrath is maybe a concept which we're not really that familiar with in our culture. But in the Bible it means it's God's righteous anger. That when we do things wrong, that God, it says in the Bible, he created us to look after the world and to look after each other. And we rebelled against him. And we decided that basically, rather than looking up to God and loving him and doing his will, we take as much as we can for ourselves, that we became selfish. And God is rightly angry at that, in the same way that a parent would be angry with their children. It says at the time of Noah that God was so angry that he regretted that he'd made man. You know, God gave us free will, and that means we have the choice whether we do right or whether we do wrong. And then he has the right to judge us according to that. Now, God's wrath is interesting in the way that it works within society. The way that you might expect or you might like God's wrath to work is that as soon as somebody does something against you, then automatically something divine comes in and punishes them straight away for that wrong thing that they've done. If somebody steals your bike when you leave it outside, then God would make sure that straight away something was taken of theirs or something like that. Well, God's wrath, it often happens at a cultural level because God doesn't want to violate our free will. There was a time when Jesus was walking the earth and a tower fell down, which was maybe in their day something like the Twin Towers in our time. You know, that a tower fell down and it killed everyone inside. And it was a religious society at that time, so people started speaking to Jesus and they said, why did this tower fall down on the people that were inside? Is it because that they were worse sinners than any of us? And Jesus said, no, it's not because they were worse sinners than you. You also have got to stop sinning, or else something like this may happen to you. And so God's wrath, when it comes, and God's anger when it comes, the timing of it may not be as you'd like it. It may not be the person who's most wrong who dies first. There's a point in the Bible where righteous people are dying, and God says, and one of the prophets says, speaking out in God's name, he says, the righteous perish and no one stops to consider it, but God is taking them out because of the trouble which is to come. He's doing it to spare them. So when God's wrath happens, often it happens at a cultural level. You'll see in the book of Deuteronomy that when a nation disobeys God, he says that you'll see an increase in cancer, you'll see an increase in stillbirths and miscarrying and in diseases and all of these kind of things. Now, who these diseases happen to, it may not seem fair. It may not be the person who's most wrong who gets the worst cancer or something like that. But it's almost like when we rebel against God, there's a divine protection which is around us, but when we rebel, that protection is removed. And the Bible says that Satan comes as a thief to steal and to kill and to destroy. And his mandate is that he wants to go wherever a person is weakest. So he will pick on often the weak first in a society. And that's often why we see a lot of injustice in the world. It says the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. And that's something of what this group is, that we want to remove some of the things which have become excuses for people. You know that if God doesn't exist, there's no way that he can pour out his wrath. If God is not the creator, there's no reason that he should judge us. If there are many gods out there, then why should the Christian God be angry if you don't worship him or do what he says? But if he is the one true God, the one who made the heavens and the earth, then he has a right to say what we do or what we don't do. You know, if you write a book, then you can decide how it can be copied. If you record a piece of music, you can decide what's done with it. And it's the same with God. He made us, and therefore he owns the rights over us. And if you've been following our series, Paul gave a talk on tracing Genesis in the ancient world, and online this has been one of our most popular talks. Thousands of people have been downloading the video and watching it. And here, Paul really answers the question, did Judeo-Christianity, did it come from pagan religions? Were there many pagan religions, and then the original authors of Genesis, that they basically took the best bits of all the pagan religions and brought them together, cooked them up into a book, and that's how we got Genesis in the early chapters of the Bible? Well, Paul looked at that, and he said, no, actually, when we look at the evidence, what we see is, yes, there are many, many religions which have the same stories as the book of Genesis in there. Actually, they're so similar to each other and so widespread. They're in different parts of the world, from South and North America to Australia. You'll find these legends of a great flood that covered the whole earth. In China, you'll see that the symbology in their writing is symbolic of the pictures given in Genesis. And so what we see is not many different religions coming in and forming Genesis. We seem to see an original creation story which has become corrupted and split up into the different tribal religions and now we've also got a book which has just come out, which is The Evolution Crisis. And this is 5 atheist scientists who tell a story of how they came to believe in the Creator God. Another question we frequently get asked is, what about all the other religions? What about Islam? What about the New Age movement? What about spiritualism, Hinduism, and witchcraft and all of these things? Aren't there many truths out there? Can't each person find their own truth? Well, these books are an attempt to answer that question, and in each one there's 5 testimonies from a leader in one of these faiths, and they give the reasons why they became a Christian. Now, I'm sure that there's people who've turned from Christianity to witchcraft and to each of these different practices. But what I've found key in these books is that you hear somebody who's a thinker in each of these faiths saying what it was about the Christian faith which destroyed their faith in what they used to believe. And it's worth reading, I think, the arguments on both sides on these subjects. Then we've got our talks. One of my favourite talks that we've had here is on the origin of life by Professor John Walton. Last week we were watching Richard Dawkins' The Root of All Evil with the Humanist Society, and Richard Dawkins there made the claim that we know where life has come from. And this is something that Professor John Walton has dealt with in one of our talks, and he said that the simplest organism that you have is 500,000 base pairs long in its DNA. And we know that the only way that you can build an organism out of DNA is by having an organism or a cell already there which can read the DNA. If you just have the DNA, you can't do anything. If you just have the cell without the DNA, you can't do anything. And so somehow the evolutionist has to believe that something like a 500,000 base pair strand long of DNA formed in the right order, and it happened to somehow fall inside a cell to reproduce. And so there's a strong argument there. And then we've looked at all sorts of different things. Did birds evolve? We've looked at the historical evidence for the Bible. You see, Christianity is a historical faith. Now, this is one of the things I'd say which is different between paganism and Christianity. Christianity believes in a powerful God, a God who works miracles, a God who's supernatural. And so does paganism. And there's many people who've turned to paganism not because it's logically consistent, but because they've had an experience of something real. A real power has touched their lives. Now, the problem with paganism is that when you try and ground that in reality and in history, you find that the stories behind these things are very hard to place anywhere. But with Christianity, you find that we're speaking about a God who came down to earth, who became a living person. The Bible was written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors, and there's a surprising consistency in what they write, and you won't find that with many of the polytheistic religions. Okay, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man, and birds, and animals, and reptiles. Here we're really looking at the transition from people who reject God. That this is the way God sees it. He sees it and he says, I think I've put enough in the world that you should know that I exist, no matter who you are or where you come from. So he's making the claim that even if outwardly you're an atheist, he says, actually, somewhere inside you know or have known that there is a God. And God's expectation of you is that you'd give him thanks. You know that if we go to a concert or see a football game or something like that, or we see somebody do something well, if somebody cooks us a nice meal, we think it's right to say thank you. And God actually expects that of us, that he's given us life, he's given us breath, he's given us everything that we have. We have food to eat, I believe, because he gives it to us. And so he's expecting us to be grateful. And it's wrong to be ungrateful. You know, if you give a present to a relative at Christmas and the child is not grateful for that, that might make you angry. And that, in some ways, is a right form of anger, because that's a kind of anger that God has as well. That he does something well and he expects thanks and praise for that. Well, although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And this is one of the things I've noticed, is that often children can see things very, very clearly. You know, I was doing some outreach, sharing my faith to people on a housing scheme, and one of the children asked the question, how can God punish people if he's good? And I said, well, God's angry at, the wrong things that we've done. And he's angry when people do wrong things to you, and he thinks that they should be punished. And then a second kid put up their hand and said, well, if God's angry at the wrong things that we've done, why hasn't he destroyed all of us already? Because the world is in such a mess. And that is really where we are. That God looks at the world and he says, the world as it is now is not consistent with my good character. I should have wiped it out. I should have destroyed it already, because it's a blot on my name, the way that people live and the things that they do. And it says that because of his mercy and because of his patience, he's waiting for us to turn around and to go his way. And he's made a way that we can do that. But when you've done wrong, often the thing you try and do is hide it. Have you ever done something wrong at home, maybe broken something? You probably have a memory of hiding it somewhere. And that echoes right back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve sinned and they hid from God. And sometimes in our culture, the cleverer that we are, the better we are at hiding things. And so it says, although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And so we thought up clever ways of saying that God isn't here. And I agree, some of them are very, very clever in the way that they work. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. And this is what the Bible calls idolatry. And in a moment we'll look at some of the idolatry which is happening. And this is where people say, God, we think there is something out there, but we don't like you. You're holy, you're good, you're righteous, and we would rather have gods which reflect us. So they invent gods often in the shape of reptiles or different things, and they worship them, and they give them the attributes they like. So if they like money, they create a god of money. If they like sex, they create a god of sex. And all of these things, And my personal belief as a Christian is that there's a real devil out there, and that when people start to worship these false gods, then there's a supernatural power which comes behind that and leads them further and further down that wrong direction. And we're going to look at this swing, how I see this trend kind of taking place within Edinburgh. Now here's David Hume, and this is a statue of David Hume which is outside the law courts. And if you look here, you'll see he's holding up a stone tablet. And if you look under his foot, there's another stone tablet. Now, in the Bible, the two stone tablets represented the Ten Commandments. And if you look at David Hume, you'll see that the tablet he's holding up is blank. What he's effectively saying is that I've wiped out the Ten Commandments. We don't need them anymore. We can make up our own laws. And if you look under his foot, there's the other tablet in defiance. And so that's the statement that we've got. God's laws were, do not lie, do not steal, do not commit adultery, honor your father and your mother, love God, worship him, And we see in each of these areas of our society that marriage breaking down, that people are committing adultery. We see lies, all the time in the newspaper, and we see a melting down of these laws, even kids killing other kids in schools, where it used to be taught, do not murder. This is what we're seeing within our own schools. In the United States, when the Columbine high school massacres happened, as normal, there were flowers placed outside the school, and as normal, they had messages on them. And the most common one was, why? And the other one is, how could God allow this thing to happen? Now, one of the girls that was killed was a Christian, and her brother answered the question of how and why can God allow this to happen? And he said that we've shut God out of our schools. We've shut the God who says do not murder out of our schools. And now this is what has happened, that we now have schools where we need to scan for guns and for knives, where children, I was reading in the paper this week that children, they want the right to implant contraceptives into the arms of young girls, and doctors will get a bonus of £80 for every contraceptive that they implant in the arms of people. And this is a very interesting thing, because often we look at the issue of contraception and these things in terms of sexual health, and obviously something like a contraceptive, which is an implant, will do nothing to protect children from STDs or any of those things. What it's really saying is, here is a license for you as a child to go out and have sex with whoever you please. Okay, this is Dynamic Earth. Now, London got the Millennium Dome, and we were lucky that we got something that was maybe a bit of a waste of money, but it wasn't as much of a waste of money as the Millennium Dome. And so it's a blessing in that way. And it's a museum which seeks to propagate the Big Bang and evolution as the theory of origins. That's what the majority of its content is about. But I'm going to look at another theme to do with this building, which is the pagan symbolism that you'll see within the building, and the way it's pushing people and towards the New Age. So as you go up the outside, you'll see there's like a stone circle coming up here. It leads up to a female fertility symbol. And then on the outside, you've got the Mother Earth, or the Mother Earth of all adventures. And of course, Mother Earth is Gaia, or the pagan god who gave birth to all of the other pantheon of pagan gods. And you may think that, well, that's just coincidence that that's there. When I went round the exhibition myself, I went round and they had the presentation at the end. It ends with you lying back and looking up into this planetarium. I think they've changed it now. And what the presentation said, it said, with so many integrated things in the world, when we see how one thing depends on another, it's not surprising that so many scientists are looking to Gaia. If you go into the bookshop in Dynamic Earth, you'll see books on evolution with Charles Darwin, but you'll find that they're next to things on ghostly and sinister tales of Edinburgh, feng shui, meditation, reflexology, tarot, yoga, Chinese astrology. This is a science exhibition, but they're very, very comfortable with the things of the New Age and of the occult. If you look at their music section, you've got the Tibetan Buddhism CD, you've got the Reiki, spiritual healing, you've got meditation, which is, I guess to Buddhism and things, what prayer is to Christians. You've got yoga, which is, again, to Hindus, something like what prayer is to Christians. Tai Chi, and something on angels, some Druid stuff at the top, some American Indian stuff. So a whole load of kind of New Agey things in this bookstore. Now, Paul looked at the reason for some of this in his talk, The Roots of Evolution, that we really trace back evolution, and we saw that this theory had come up many times in history, and we believe that evolution stems out of the Hindu reincarnation system. In Hinduism, you have life coming from very simple forms out of the sea, and by reincarnation it comes into ever more complex forms, and then eventually to humans, and then to God. Erasmus Darwin, Darwin's great-grandfather, that he, in his spiritual poems, wrote a poem about an embryon fibre which turns into a fish, which climbs out onto the land, and which eventually develops lungs, and then it breathes in the silvery air, and it feels the breathe. Then it claves to a mammalian breast, and then the poem ends until step by step, aspiring trod, you climb from nature to the throne of God. You know, that was the spiritual side of evolution, that it never ended with human beings. It ended with human beings becoming God. And that's an echo, again, of what it says in the Bible about Satan. He said that I will ascend to the throne of God. I will be like God. And that's the promise that he gives to humanity, is that you can become gods. And that's the promise in the New Age movement, that each one of us is a god somehow in our own right, and that we can determine reality, is kind of what New Agers think, by thinking or by believing, which means there are really many divergent realities happening at the same time. They try and link this in with quantum theory. And so on the Royal Mile, at the centre of the Enlightenment, which David Hume was a part of, were the Freemason lodges. And this was where many of the discussions happened in the Enlightenment. And one of the conditions of the Select Society, they were a society which discussed every area of knowledge, from the age of the earth to economics to politics to education. And they said, you can discuss whatever you like in this society, as long as you don't talk about revealed religion. And it's not surprising that when they start out with that condition, that you'll never get anything which points back to God. And so what we see coming out of the Enlightenment is lots of interesting things about every field that you can think about economics, all of these different things. And when you read it, it doesn't seem necessarily all the time to be anti-God. But after you've read the whole lot of it, you think, well, we've covered the whole sphere of everything there is to talk about, and we can't see God anywhere in this. Perhaps it's because he's not there. Well, in the Erasmus Darwin, he was a Freemason. I believe Monboddo as well was. He was a forerunner for evolution. Adam Smith and many, many others. Now, Freemasonry is, though it outwardly seems to pretend to have a Christian kind of ethos around it, it really, when you look at the guts of it, goes back into Eastern religions, and there are strong echoes again of Hinduism in it. And now this is a Freemason lodge on the Royal Mile. There's 3 active Freemason lodges there, and at the moment it's where you'll find tea leaf reading, crystal balls, angel and fairy card reading, past life readings, and all of these different things. And this is where the Enlightenment was happening. There's a clairvoyant reading tarot, and this is the Freemason Lodge. And if you go out onto the streets, you'll find Edinburgh is littered with shops to do with witchcraft and the occult. Now, I'd make the case that Edinburgh, from rejecting God, has not become an intellectual city. It has become a very, very, very superstitious city. And so you've got the witchcraft shops. This is an occult suppliers. You see a crystal ball in the window. I looked on their website, and apparently you can buy a flying potion from there. I'm not quite sure what it does, but you can get that. Then you've got the tours which go underground and looking at the what they're calling the haunted city and things like that. There's another one. There's another one. And there's, I think, about 6 or 7 of these tours. There's Death. He's looking quite happy in that one. And then out of the city, we gave birth to Harry Potter, which really takes something of the feel of Edinburgh, and it transplants it worldwide. And so we're seeing hundreds of millions of these books sold, and young people becoming fascinated by witchcraft. Witchcraft covens are saying, we keep getting kids phoning up and knocking on our door saying we want to be witches, and they're saying we're getting really annoyed with it because we think it's quite tough and hard being a witch, but when every little kid's doing it, it doesn't quite have the same atmosphere to it. And I think many people who've been involved in witchcraft say that most of the occult practices which are spoken of in Harry Potter relate to some fairly genuine occult practices, And yes, there are strong messages of friendship and other things in the books. There are positive things in there, but there is a glorification of the occult and of the supernatural, and it paints a picture, something, of the superstitious age into which we're moving into. Okay, this is some just press cuttings. The highlights of the Ghost Festival coming up in 2008 will include a scientific experiment from Edinburgh University's Department of Parapsychology and an exclusive event with Most Haunted star Richard Felix. So the same Edinburgh University that would laugh at the idea of there being an intelligent designer finds it quite a reasonable thing to investigate hauntings and to set up a parapsychology unit. And they do this every year. And so this was from 2 years ago. Professor Richard Wiseman, University of Hertfordshire, I think he does a lot on the telly, announces the initial results of a large-scale scientific investigation into Mary King's Close, a series of allegedly haunted streets and houses under Edinburgh's Royal Mile. Approximately 70% of people visiting the haunted locations reported experiencing some kind of unusual phenomena, compared with only 48% of those in the 2 control locations. Although some of the reported experiences were relatively mild, e.g. a sudden feeling of cold, many were more significant, with participants experiencing a sense of being watched, touched, or having their clothing tugged, seeing apparitions of humans and animals, and hearing footsteps. Over 80% of the people reported strange experiences at the most haunted location, an area at the bottom at the bottom in the close associated with a sinister-looking apparition of a figure dressed in black, compared to just 50% of those visiting the least active control location, the base of the dark stairwell, not associated with apparitions. And Wiseman, I think, says that he basically says that these things seem to happen, but I think the control wasn't on a par with its scariness with the other locations. So he's saying that basically, yes, it may appear that there's something happening, but with his scientific brain, he can see that actually there could be other things which happen, like the humidity could cause people to think that their clothing is somehow being tugged or something like that. And those were the things that he was kind of saying. And this was the result of for the group Nesta that was putting it on. Catherine Matherson, Nesta Learning Program Manager, said one of Nesta's chief aims is to engage the public's appreciation of science, technology, and arts in new and imaginative ways. This fascinating study does just that by really bringing physics to life, by attempting to link what most people believe to be superstition or legend to hard scientific fact. So they see this as a very worthy cause of investigation, and that's the point that they're making. Not that they agree anything is happening there, but that they seem to have given a lot of evidence which certainly these Ghosts and Ghouls tours can use. They can now have up on their placards, 80% of people experience something unusual in our most haunted vault scientifically proven. They can say those things. And this is the same crowd which is so hostile towards intelligent design. Last year, the Pagan Federation held its Scottish conference at Edinburgh University, but the move enraged the Christian Union, which accused the university of double standards after banning one of its events, which outlined the dangers of homosexuality. That was in the Sunday Times this week. So Edinburgh seems to have had its doors wide open for paganism in this kind of way, presenting an open door for these things. Okay, now moving on to the next section. This one. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, to the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Now, if we can have the lights down again.
Tarpaulin for putting on the bags.
Right, okay, your bag.
Charles Darwin.
Now, one of the things you'll notice in this passage is that I think 3 or 4 times it says that therefore God gave them over. And the way that God's wrath often works is that actually rather than directly punishing something, he lets the consequences of what we're doing happen to us. So it says that God was offended that people had rejected him as creator, and he didn't at that point pour out his wrath by sending us a thunderbolt. It said, therefore he gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual immorality, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. And this is something, I think, of what we saw at Beltane, is that people are basically, at the very least, what they're doing is worshipping sex. Now, obviously, there's a lot of imagery with demons and all of these things there, and these are things that, as a Christian, I would believe are real spiritual entities. And at Beltane, there were 12 or 13,000 people there. Now, something that Paul and I noticed is that we both work doing evangelism. We share our faith with people, and so we're on the receiving end of what people think about Christianity. And the common thing is that when we share our faith about Christianity, they say, oh, the Bible's been disproved, it's full of contradictions, there's nothing historically accurate anywhere in the Bible, everything contradicts, it's all complete nonsense, there's nothing to validate it at all. And then we go up to Beltane, and it's exactly the same crowd of people there who said, we completely reject Christianity because of its illogicalness and its inconsistency, and yet they'll buy in very easily to a form of religion where the kind of worship that you do is not righteous action and loving others, but is sexual morality and drunkenness and orgies and the like. And I think that there's a willingness within people's hearts to buy in to the things which they'll be okay with. I'd really say that if Christianity is something that you've rejected, ask the question, is it because there's something incompatible in my life with whom God is? Jesus said, you've heard it was said to people long ago, do not commit adultery. He said, but I tell you, whoever even looks with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. If your eye causes you to sin, then gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole of your body to be thrown into hell. We see the breakdown of marriage within our society, and we know that children, are meant to be brought into the world by male and by female, and the best place for children to grow up is where they have 2 loving parents. I'd agree that a relationship where there's abuse between these parents is not a healthy environment for a child, but the very best that they can have is to have 2 parents who can stay together through those 18 years of them growing up, even stay together still as grandparents. Now, when you see sexual morality where people are sharing lovers with everyone else, where we're just one big pool of humanity that can all have sex with everybody, then you have no stability within those relationships. And there, as we see in the last section, you see an unwinding of the whole of the moral fabric of society. Okay, this is my local newsagent, and this is what they seem to think it means to be a man. This is the men's section. Very kind of simple picture, tells 1,000 words. This is what they think men should be thinking about, and that's the eye level of children. You see it every time you go into a newsagent. This is what the Bible says. It says, the prostitute reduces you to a loaf of bread, and the adulteress preys upon your very life. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without into his lap without his clothes being burned? That's in Proverbs. Yes, and these are some things, just clippings again from the paper. To commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Abortion Act last year, there was a rally in Westminster and a ghoulish service of remembrance for the estimated 6.7 million fetuses destroyed since 1967. The person writing that article was pro-abortion, and they were saying that this was a good thing because these children weren't wanted and would have grown up in homes where they weren't wanted. Apparently, about 1% of abortions which happen for either rape or some kind of disability. 99% of abortions seem to be abortions of convenience. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, one of the points that Dawkins brought up was the cruelty of God in wiping out cultures. At various points in the Bible, it would say that God would say to the Israelites, go in and destroy this people group. Don't leave anyone alive. You know, and when you read in the Bible, you look and you see what was actually happening in those cultures. They were worshipping a pagan god called Molech. And Molech was a god who had hands which were outstretched like this. And they'd light a fire underneath him, and his hands would glow red hot. And they'd take the newly born children from their sexual morality, and they'd place them into the hands of this idol, and they'd die and they'd be burned up. And so they didn't have contraception in those days, and so what they did was just have children and sacrifice them to their God. And there are many Christians who would see the parallel today with abortion, that they'd think maybe there's something spiritual behind what we're doing here when we're seeing this level of abortion, that on the one hand, people in the media, sex being encouraged in every way, and then on the other hand, abortion being encouraged. And it's creating a society where we see children effectively as disposable, you know. And this was something as a non-Christian that I was once a kind of atheist agnostic, and I believed that abortion wasn't wrong. And when I met Christians, it got me thinking, and I thought the reason I think abortion isn't wrong is because the baby doesn't know that it's being killed, or that the baby isn't wanted and will have a bad life, or the baby is dependent on its parents. But then I began to think for the first time, by extension, well, actually, when a baby's born, it may not be wanted by its parents. Would it be right to kill a baby outside the womb? A baby, when it's outside the womb, is fully dependent on its parents. We're not independent until, at least the age of about 13, maybe 8, if you're very, very independent. Some street children can make a way for themselves and things like that. And what about if you're unwanted? There are some people who are lonely and don't have any friends around them. Would it be right to kill them? And by any of those standards, I would have to say that by my morality, where I'd say it's right to kill a baby in the womb, I'd also have to say it's right to kill various groups within society. And that disturbed me as a non-Christian, and maybe it disturbs some others. This was, again, at the Humanist Society this week. We were given a free paper, the Humanite. Maybe pick up a copy of it, read it, see what they're saying. And in it, they had a prize-winning essay. And the essay was on sex, and this is what the essayist wrote who won it. I'm just going to bring a couple of quotes out here. And she's basically making the point that toleration has run its course. She's saying that it was important that we spoke about tolerance in the past because people needed to become more tolerant. But now the problem is that by being tolerant, we have to be tolerant of Christians as well. And they have all sorts of unhelpful views, like lots of things about sex which they think are wrong. And so we shouldn't really be tolerant of them when they say these things. And this is what she says. It's a bit muddly language, or a bit big words. In fact, what I have witnessed amongst them is a tentative and an embarrassment in voicing disgust or even disapproval of many of the abhorrent norms governing attitudes to sexual behaviour throughout the world. This reluctance to celebrate and advocate the right of all sexual actors to enjoy a guiltless sexual identity which we now enjoy comes from a confused and unsubstantiated cultural relativism. So she's saying that cultural relativism is standing in the way of the free expression of sex. Actually, we want to be militant in the way that we say everyone should have sex in whatever way that they please, and we shouldn't tolerate those who would put any kind of boundary on what sex is. She says the way forward is essentially to make the term sexual morality a redundant one. And in the Bible, it says that sin is lawlessness. You saw there David Hume with his 10 Commandments wiped out blank. And here's a young humanist saying, this is what we should do in the area of sexual immorality. Well, the problem is that it's not something which I believe ends there. So it says, because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, men also abandon natural relations with women, are inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Now, here are some more magazines. This is one called Love It. I dumped my hubby to seduce her sister. This is one of the values which is being put out to young people and to women in women's magazines. This is a T-shirt aimed at teenagers. Dip me in chocolate and throw me to the lesbians. Now, this was an interesting quote I found in the Independent Gay Forum, speaking about, I think it's Professor Ruock's book, Forbidden Friendships, and he looks at sexuality and culture in the past. And so this is the quote. Ruock's book, Forbidden Friendships, received excellent scholarly reviews, but little popular attention when it was first published 2 years ago. Now issued in softcover at half the hardbound price, it deserves wider readership by gays who may find the lives of men half a millennia ago and across the seas a distant mirror of our own lives, full of fascinating similarities and disconcerting differences. By Ruock's reckoning, homosexuality was pervasive in Florence. In the small city of just 40,000 people, he estimates that 17,000 men were incriminated on charges of sodomy during the 70-year existence of the Officers of the Night. That amounts, he points out, to nearly half the male population of the city during 2 generations. Whether Rock's population estimates are accurate or not, such a prevalence for allegations of sodomy is remarkable and would appear to implicate a substantial minority of the male population over 2 generations, and that estimate no doubt misses others who did not come to judicial notice. Now, the reason I put this in here is because one of the cases which is made for homosexuality and lesbianism and these things is that it's something which is inbuilt in people, that they're born with these tendencies, and for this reason it's right that they express themselves in those ways. And there may be some truth to some of these things. As Christians, certainly we believe that each of us has sinful tendencies. Some are more prone to alcoholism, some are more prone to lust, some are more prone to all sorts of different things. Now, the thing which interested me about this quote is that in the Bible, of course, the most famous story about homosexuality was Sodom and Gomorrah. And there it says that every male within that city turned up at Lot's door to demand that he brought out his male guests so that they could have sex with them. And the thing which interests me there is that basically it says that the whole culture had become homosexual, which means that it couldn't have been a genetic thing in that case. And here in Florence we see an echo of this in recorded history, but not biblical history. And of course you had the Renaissance going on at that time, and all of the art fairly sort of pornographic in what it was showing, and maybe leading culture down that route. And I'd say maybe today we're in that position where we're actually, rather than just speaking about equality, we're actually leading people in a direction, and we may see a culture where sexual norms are thrown out, and that we come to see something which the Bible says isn't normal and isn't natural as being equal with marriage. And on this point, I'd say that there are differences between homosexuality and heterosexuality. Each of us owes our lives to heterosexual sex. You know, that in the Bible it says that God is a God of life, and Satan is someone who comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. And life is a good thing, and death is a bad thing. And we've seen that homosexuality cannot create life, and therefore I'd say it is not on a par with heterosexual sex. It's not on a par with marriage. It's a different thing. I'm just saying it's not equal and not the same. The second point I'd bring out, and this is just as creationists, you know, that we don't believe in evolution as creationists, in macroevolutionists. We do believe in natural selection. Now, the idea that homosexuality is built in the genome doesn't really stand up to the test of natural selection, because it's something which would be wiped out. If it were kind of pure homosexuality, it would be wiped out within a single generation. It's probably, in terms of natural selection, it would be the least favourable tendency. That's to say nothing to do with morality, just from a point of view of mathematics and biology. We would never see the prevalence of 17,000 men in a city of 40,000 if it was a purely genetic cause. Interestingly, when the Christian Union held a course called the Pure Course, talking about living a pure life sexually, the university was outraged. The student newspaper was outraged, and the chaplaincy was outraged. And this group was banned from university property, it was banned from Students' Union, it was banned from the chaplaincy. All three were in complete agreement. And the point which the Christians had was, for me, it seemed fairly weak, that in a footnote in a leader's manual, they gave reference to a book where there were people who had testimony that they were previously homosexuals, but after becoming Christians, they'd been set free from that. Now, in the Bible it says this. It says that there were many of you who were homosexuals, there were many of you who were adulterous and various other things, but thanks be to God that you were set free from those things. And so that's in the time that Paul was writing, homosexuality was certainly very prevalent within Rome and within that culture. And he was saying that people had come into the church and that they'd seen their lives changed around. Now, we believe in a miracle working God, a God who can set people free from anything, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's pornography, any wrong thing that we're addicted to. God can break that open. So he's a God of power. So, but the CU was thrown off campus for making these claims. And then, interestingly, Edinburgh University, I guess the Students' Union or LGBT Society, invited Peter Tatchell, and the chaplaincy opened the doors wide to him to talk on the subject, the global struggle for queer liberation. So Edinburgh chaplaincy, which was once a hotbed for world evangelization and taking the gospel out to the world, now sees its cause as the struggle for queer liberation worldwide. And so we've seen a real swing in culture there. Then this is a historian Arnold Toynbee, and he's made the biggest study ever, I think, of world cultures and civilizations, and why one civilization fell and another one rose up. And this is what he had to say. Let's see. Historian Arnold Toynbee, who was educated at Winchester and New College, Oxford, and became a professor at the University of London, concluded that a society's creative energy is tied to the control of sexual drives. Sexual self-control is linked directly to national strength and accomplishment. Lack of self-control with national weakness and deterioration. Toynbee's research indicated that of history's 21 greatest civilizations, 19 perished from internal moral corruption, not external enemies. And so I don't think that he's coming from a Christian angle. I'm not sure if he is, but he's saying that that was the pattern that happened, that once sexual morality became widespread, the generation that follows that is a generation which haven't been brought up in stable homes, and then you see a meltdown within the society in which you live in, unless God steps in. Okay, this is what C.S. Lewis said. Though the right of happiness is chiefly claimed for the sexual impulse, it seems to me impossible that the matter should stay there. The fatal principle once allowed in that department must sooner or later seep through our whole lives. We thus advance towards a state of society in which not only each man, but every impulse in each man claims carte blanche, and then though our technical skills may help us survive a little longer, our civilization will have died at heart, and will one day not even add, dare not even add, unfortunately, be swept away. And I think that's just a consequence of the wrong things that we do. You know, that even if God doesn't destroy us, that we would destroy ourselves through sexually transmitted diseases and through the things that we're doing as a consequence of our own actions. You know, as Christians, we believe that God has made a very definite end of the world, that he's decided when it will end. But even those who aren't Christians can look at the world and say that even if there is no God who's set an end date for the world, then the world looks like it will destroy itself. You know, I think even Dawkins said that the world may have a 50% chance of, or humanity at least, of destroying itself, you know, within the next 50 years. It's 50-50 whether we make it, and that's an atheist reckoning. I'm not sure if it was Dawkins, but I think it was somebody speaking from that perspective. Let's see. And then we move on to the final part of this talk. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They've become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. I just picked up one of these magazines from on the side there, and it gives some of the statistics of where we are as a country at the moment. During 2006, 201,000 abortions were carried out in England and Wales, and 13,000 in Scotland. The total is 214,000, the highest ever recorded, and this reflects a rise of 3.9% on the previous year. We have witnessed a consistent increase since abortion was legalized 40 years ago in 1968, when 22,000 terminations took place. On the subject of marriage, currently 1 in 3 marriages ends in divorce. In 2005, there were 155,000 divorces in England and Wales. I was looking at Tesco online, I think it was about a year ago, and they were selling various legal packs. And they had a divorce kit, I think, which costed about £5 or something. And then they had double reward points on it, that if you bought it, then you get all sorts of bonuses. And so we're looking for easy ways out of society. We're a society which is faithless. You know, that we don't keep our word, we don't keep our promises, and we don't like the idea of having to do that. On the subject of alcohol, in 1995-96, before 24/7 drinking, 89,280 adults were admitted to hospital due to alcohol. Then 2005-2006, it's up to 187,600 adults admitted to hospital. In 1995-96, 3,870 children admitted to hospital due to alcohol. Then 2005-2006, we're up to 5,280. So the trend that we're seeing is a slide. If something doesn't happen, I'm sure as evolutionists out there, you like to look at what the current trend is and then plot it back through billions and billions of years. Well, I'd say look at the trends within society, what's happening year on year, and plot out the graph for that and see where we're heading morally. They've become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. Evil, greed, and depravity. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. And you see those things in the papers. You see the murder, the divorce, that relates to strife. You see the lies told in government, and I'm sure you know the lies which are told around you. They're gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. Managed to collect some pictures for this. Oh, no, I've not got them there yet. Okay, yeah, that's a statistic. Yeah, these for gossip. So we looked at the men's magazines and we saw what men are reading. This is what women are reading. Diana died a while ago, and they have still got exclusives about things that she said. This is this week. Rediscovered and published for the first time since her death, a mother's poignant plea. And so we've got Diana's gossip. Then we've got some celebrity couple who's going to share what happened on their honeymoon and in their wedding. Then K-Fed's tell all from honeymoon to hell. Somebody's going to dish up the dirt on their husband. And there's a nude photo scandal in that one. Alicia's mad love triangle. Would you like to find out about that? That's the news this week. Denise confesses the truth about her booze hell. Let's see. Posh Spice. The shock. Something's covering it up. Life with David. Can you imagine what that might be? What shock could possibly be there in Victoria's life? And another one. The bitter family feud tearing them apart. More gossip in there. Brittany's pregnancy. Shock. Again. So the news about Brittany. Some magazine is snooping around, following her, trying to inform everyone, every little thing that she does so that they can gossip about her. And then Angelina Jolie. Is she putting her children in danger? Is she a bad mum? Is that something we should all be talking about, whether she's good or bad? Would you like that if that was you? Then somebody else, torn apart. And lonely stars, secret internet dates. Next time you're on the internet, you could find a lonely celebrity. It's behind one of the profiles. And this is what it says in the Bible. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much. A gossip separates close friends. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without gossip, a quarrel dies down. As charcoal to embers, and as wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to a man's inmost parts. Like a coating of glaze over earthenware are fervent lips with an evil heart. You know, any of you who've been spoken against, you'll know what it feels like when you walk into a room and you realise that either something untrue has been said about you, which is slander, or something private has been said about you that you wished others didn't know about. And that's what gossip does. It destroys family, it destroys society, it destroys culture. Now, I could have got pictures for each of the other things on this, and I was kind of running out of time as I was researching these things. Then this is our kids, It says that it says that people have become insolent, arrogant, and boastful. So here's some insolence. I really, really don't give. I don't discriminate. I hate everyone. I can only please one person each day. Today is not your day. Tomorrow does not look good either. The atheist army, it says they've become senseless and faithless. And so this is a faithless generation, radical non-believers against every form of religion. Now, this is just a segment of society. It's not everyone. And so it goes on. They're insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. Only look at the new scientific fields, what we're planning to do with animal and human embryos. That is, we discover new things, like we discover the atom bomb. We discover hydrogen bomb. We discover neutron bomb. That we, as soon as we find out something new, we find a way of doing evil with it. And for all the breakthroughs that you see in the papers, you'll see that there will be other people working with these same genetic technologies to do something even more unhelpful. So you'll see that there'll be people working in germ warfare and all these different things. Although they, let's say, senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless, although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but they also approve of those who practice them. And so we see a society that approves of the wrong things that people do. Now, that's not where it's left, because it says in the Bible that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It says very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were caught up in all these things that are wrong, God knew that we couldn't go into heaven having done those things and being like that in our hearts. He knew that sin had to be punished. And he did the only thing that he could do. God's wrath, we said earlier, was revealed against mankind. So only a man could receive that wrath. And when Jesus went to the cross, the wrath of God was poured out upon him. God's anger at all the abortion, the rape, the murder, the things we see in our society, the deceit and the gossip and the pornography, it was poured out on Jesus Christ on that day. Jesus then descended into hell. It says that he defeated death and he rose up from the grave, and he's now seated at the right hand of God. And because Jesus himself never did anything wrong, he deserves eternal life. And he said that he wants to share that with anyone who's willing to receive it. Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and have it in all its fullness. The good thing about eternal life is it doesn't matter how many people you share it between, it's still eternal life. So just as the wrath of God is corporately being poured out on us, and sometimes we don't get what we deserve, that we sin and we see disease come into our culture, and maybe we get ill, but it's not our fault. Well, Jesus, he took the things that weren't his fault upon himself, and now there's a way that we can get something else that we don't deserve, and that is God's forgiveness and the gift of eternal life. Thank you very much for listening.